I'd like to talk today about white privilege. One of the more controversial aspects of the present dialogue in terms of racism in America is the idea, is there white privilege? What is white privilege? Should white privilege be taught? And so I think it's a topic worth exploring a bit. And I'd like to do it in the context of a teacher recently who was fired from his teaching position for teaching about white privilege. His name was Matthew Horn. He was 43 years old. He was teaching about white privilege in a high school in rural Tennessee. And the environment in which he was teaching, they certainly were not open to this type of teaching. They didn't think it was appropriate. He was a lifelong resident of Kingsport, where the school was located, and he had taught in the school for 16 years. So this was not a new teacher. This was a teacher who had a track record of teaching. He taught a class called Contemporary Issues for 10 years, and during those 10 years, he had not a single complaint from a parent. So this was not somebody with a history who was, teaching stuff that parents were upset about, for a long time. He told his class, white privilege is a fact. And of course, that's what got him into trouble, saying it is a fact. A lot of people resist that. They say, well, it's not really a fact. Maybe it's a theory, it's speculative. How can you determine with absolute certainty that white privilege is a fact? What do you mean? What are the facts that you have to support that fact? So that's where the discussion lies. And a lot of parents, particularly white parents, are concerned about this. They say that it's not a good thing to teach. It's going to create maybe a race war or race hostility, teaching that way. So there's a resistance to that type of teaching, obviously. He assigned an essay to his class from Ta-Nehisi Coates, the first white president. And he was issued a reprimand for doing this. They said it's one-sided teaching. You're just presenting this one side. That's not a good thing. When you're teaching, you have to present both sides. We don't like your style of teaching here. You're trying to kind of force this down people's throats. He also showed a YouTube video on white privilege, which was a scathing 4-minute poetry performance by Kyla Jenny Lacey. And during this, the idea of white privilege was brought up, and it was done very forcefully, and a number of people in the community objected to that. That May, the month when Horn showed the video, the Tennessee legislature passed a law banning critical race theory from its schools and for forbidding educators from teaching that an individual, by virtue of the individual's race or sex, is inherently privileged, racist, sexist, or oppressive. So they were quite clear. You can't teach that someone, just because they have a certain race, are inherently privileged. That is not something that is allowable to be taught in our schools in Tennessee. And you can't teach that somebody, just because of their race or sex, is racist, or that they're sexist, or that they're in any way oppressive. That is not something that we want taught in our schools. 11 states have passed laws or approved resolutions censoring what teachers can say about race in their classrooms, in K-12 classrooms. So this is obviously a hot topic in those states. They said this is what you can teach about racism, this is what you can't teach. You can't present these particular theories, the critical race theories, or white privilege, or this. You're not allowed to do that in our state. One was charged with not allowing students to have access to varying points of view. So the basic uh, complaint against him was, you can present certain points of view, but you got to present complementary points of view, and you're just giving one point of view. And when you teach one point of view, that is not a good thing. The new Tennessee law allows for large fines against a school district where teachers break the rules, and offending teachers can lose their license to teach. So naturally, if you have a teacher in your school district and she or he is teaching something that is potentially involved with this law in Tennessee, you know, you're in that school district, you're saying, well, we don't want a large fine levied against us for allowing this, so we're going to shut it down. And that, of course, was the case in Horn's situation. And also, a teacher could lose their license to teach. So not only is the school district being fined, the teacher can lose their teacher license. So it's going to be certainly a large disincentive for teachers to teach anything that might possibly be objectionable. This raises a couple of questions for us to ponder. Is it appropriate for a state legislature to limit what can be taught about race in a public school? The problem is that you get into certain political considerations. The legislature has a certain number in one party. They can say, well, we don't want this taught, we want this taught, and they might be teaching more the philosophy of their particular political party rather than something that is historically true. So that becomes an issue, certainly. And then can a state legislature alter historical facts to promote their own political viewpoint that would be tied in? Can we say, well, we want to say, for example, that the Confederacy actually won the Civil War because, that's our political belief supports that. We believe in that. And we want that taught in our schools. Say something kind of crazy like, well, that's not the historical fact. It's like saying, well, in World War II, the Germans won that war, actually, and you're like, well, wait a minute, no, that's not. So, can you, as a political body, alter historical fact? Now, when you get into a question like white privilege, what are the facts that would, enhance that, support that, back that up? That would be the consideration, and that would be the discussion. Some parents would say, well, there are no facts. Others would say these are the. So you'd have to have really a discussion about, well, what are the facts? Some people, for example, will say, well, privilege is something that is related more to economic status. So it could be white privilege, but there could also be black privilege, Asian privilege, Hispanic privilege. Someone who is very wealthy certainly has more access to certain resources. Is that a privilege? Do they have a privileged life? Those are important questions to explore and to kind of look at. But I think this incident in Tennessee raises some of those questions for us. To what extent can a legislature be involved? And what are the guidelines we can set up for teachers in these situations that would benefit, obviously, our students?